Well, good morning, or actually now good afternoon. I'm John Wuorinen, the Director of Admissions and Tuition Assistance here at Columbus Academy. Close the door. Because this is being recorded, I'm going to start again. Good afternoon. I'm John Wuorinen, the Director of Admissions and Tuition Assistance here at Columbus Academy. Welcome to our Zoom at noon. This afternoon, we are talking with John Exline about tuition assistance. And frankly, I know a little bit about it as well. And so it'll be a conversation between the two of us. As always, please put your questions in the chat if you have some. This time they could be nuts and boltsy questions about tuition assistance. Nancy Velasquez, our super technological member of our admissions team, she's on this Zoom and she's going to be curating the questions. So please do help us direct the conversation so that you all get the information that you need. Make sense? I hope. So again, John Exline, first, why don't you introduce yourself? And if you don't do a good enough job, I'm going to fill in.
My name is John Exline. I've had two boys that have graduated from the Columbus Academy, and I've been doing the helping with the tuition assistance now for 20 some years. I'm a teacher here at the Academy. I teach honors economics, and actually I got to teach Mr. Wuorinen here many years ago. But at any rate, I have seen a lot of change in the way the program is used and has developed over the years. And of course, the Academy, we've changed with the changes that have occurred in the program. And of course, the purpose of the program is to help provide the opportunity for those who are unable to afford an academy education to do so. And in doing that, we use the SSS program, which is one that is run by the National Association of Independent Schools, and which attempts to change on a regular basis to try to adapt to the changing situations of the economy.
Sure. And as Mr. Exline left out, this is actually his 54th year teaching and coaching at the Columbus Academy. And he was my 8th grade American history teacher and as well my senior year economics teacher. So he's a real institution here at our institution. So John, you mentioned that there have been changes. But before talking about any of those sorts of things, can you just describe the process of how one applies for Columbus Academy's tuition assistance program?
Well, the primary method is to do so through the SSS website. And after logging in, creating a password and all that, logging in, there is a certain amount of information you need to provide about your income, your assets, the number of children you have, the number of children that attend tuition-paying schools. And then that information is used by SSS with a series of algorithms that they have to try to come up with what they call an EFC, which is an estimated family contribution. There is also on that application the opportunity for the parents or the family to put down their ability to pay, what they see as their parent contribution could be what we call the PTOP, or the parent offer to pay. And then we look at the EFC and what the parent's offer was, and then based upon the changes in, if it's a returning student, the changes in tuition and any changes in the situation of the family, we come up with an amount based upon, first of all, the amount of money we have for tuition assistance, and secondly, any increase in the burden for the family or increase in the income for the family. For new students, obviously, it's a first-time thing, and we try to, as much as possible, meet the need. Although, as John would tell you, our sources, our funds are not unlimited, and therefore we are typically looking at an 80 to 90% range for that estimated family contribution that we're able to provide in tuition assistance. So it will vary. Usually lower school, middle school, upper school. We look at a little bit different things, because obviously when someone comes into lower school for tuition assistance, it's a much longer term commitment by the school. And we do try to maintain that commitment. We still ask families to apply every year to take into consideration any changes in their income, either positive or negative, and also that way to take into consideration any changes in our situation regarding tuition and also the funds that we have available.
Right. Actually, NAIS, we are members of NIS, the National Association of Independent Schools, and they put out a series of guidelines, a series of practices that they expect their principles of good practice that they expect their member schools to adhere to. One of those relating to tuition assistance is that if a family is brought in at a certain level of tuition assistance and a certain level of net tuition, that is that your tuition minus the tuition assistance that a family receives, assuming that there is no significant change in a family's situation, economically speaking, the family should expect to receive the same award that nets out to roughly the same tuition. And so that actually is a practice that we try to adhere to as best we can. As Mr. Exline mentioned, our pot of resources, our budgeted tuition assistance amount is limited. And so something 80 to 90% of demonstrated need we meet. In the lower school, however, because as John said, our commitment is for more years. It could be up to, we make grants for tuition assistance beginning in pre-K. And so the school is looking at up to a 14-year commitment to families. Because of that, typically awards in the lower school are limited to about 50% tuition. There are some exceptions, but for those lower school families, please realize that. John, how does it work in terms of what's the timeline? We have returning families on tuition assistance, and then we have families who are new. How does that work?
Well, we do the returning families first, both those that previously were on financial aid, and also occasionally we will have students who are returning, but a need has arisen for them also to have financial aid. So students who are families that are currently have students at the academy, their application has to be in by the end of December. And then when we send out contract information in late January 20th, 21st, in that range, we send the award or the tuition assistance amount at that time as well. So we need to have that information by the end of December so that not only the SSS, but also our office and our committee can examine all the situations that we have. Then with the money that we have after making those awards, then we begin looking at our candidates for new admission. And the admission process is need blind. In other words, we don't take into consideration the need of the family in terms of admission. Then after a family is admitted, a student is admitted, then we soon after that, within a couple of weeks after that, we come up with an amount for that family that based upon, once again, the amount of money we have and also the demonstrated need by the family. And once again, that's March 1st, I believe, is the
March 1st is the notification date for admission. And then we try to get the grants out for the families that have applied for tuition assistance, we try to get that information, whether or not a family received a grant and how much, within a couple of days. Worth noting is that the contract, the enrollment contract itself, will always contain the actual amount of tuition that we charge for the grade. Excuse me. So if a family if a family has applied for tuition assistance, they will get a contract that actually reports full tuition. The grant letter is an addendum to that contract, and it will come a couple days later. You don't have to sign the contract until after receiving the information about your grant. So sometimes families are a bit confused. Wait a minute, I applied for tuition assistance, and wow, that number is larger than I expected in terms of the tuition. So please realize that. John, how does it work for families that have two households? This is very important, because there's some confusion sometimes about this.
Yes, if there are two households, both households have to submit the financial aid information to SSS. And we look at both of those, and also one of the algorithms takes into consideration the fact that there's an additional expense in supporting two households, and therefore it's not simply looking at the total income of the two households. We also take into consideration the additional expenses involved in supporting two households. It is one of the issues that we run into is where there is a separation has occurred where one parent perhaps no longer communicates with the other household. If that is the case, that has to be documented, and we need to see information that supports that. Obviously, there are circumstances that sometimes require just looking at one household, but under those practices that Mr. Wuorinen referred to earlier, that's one of the things that we have to do is we have to look at the income of both households, although we do take into consideration the additional expense involved with that.
Exactly. And it is sometimes people wonder about that, and they wonder why. And I just a quick illustration. If a household splits, there's a divorce or separation or something along those lines, and one household has significant resources. The other parent, if they apply for tuition assistance, we need to see both households involved. It is not, again, NAIS principles of good practice say that both parents have responsibility to contribute to the education of their student. Routinely, I get questions about this. If you have some, don't hesitate to reach out and email me directly. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else should we mention? We're ready for some questions.
Well, we do take into consideration too, if there are multiple children in a family, we have the estimated family contribution. For example, if there was an estimated family contribution of $10,000 and you had two students, we would assume that it would be $5,000 for each. We also should include the fact that if you have a student that is in college, that's considered a student at a tuition paying school, but just like you would apply for financial aid for tuition assistance at the academy, the expectation is you would also apply for tuition assistance at that college. And, although the school does want to provide the tuition assistance where it's needed, we don't look at applying tuition assistance to enable the financial commitment of the family to go completely to a student in college. So we would assume that that estimated family contribution would be split evenly among students at tuition paying schools. Also, we would also take into consideration if the tuition paying school if you had two students in two different schools and one school was considerably less expensive than another, we would expect you to pay a little bit more towards the academy in that situation. So although we do divide the amount by the number of students in tuition paying schools, we also have to take into consideration the relative cost of other primary or secondary schools.
Mr. Exline, talk a little bit about businesses. Some of our applying families have businesses, or they want to have one parent is going back to school, say, going to get a degree of some sort to help. Talk to me a little bit about that. Or
well, with the business, with the example of businesses, there is part of the SSS format that asks you to put down specific information about the business in terms of assets, gross income, net income, expenses, so on and so forth. And there are within that algorithm, there are things that we look at in terms of whether or not some of the costs of the business are monetary costs. For example, we usually exclude depreciation from the expensing of a business account, because although that is a taxable situation, it's not money that has to be paid out. And therefore, sometimes the net income of a business that you would see on a tax form would be greater in our calculations, because we would exclude that depreciation. And then conversely, we would also, though, take into consideration perhaps the higher tax rate that you would have to pay, or the lower tax rate you would have to pay, depending upon how that business income was figured. So that's important that we see that information for the business in order to make an accurate representation of the estimated family contribution. As far as the situation for, I don't know, businesses usually require a little bit closer examination, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So make sure that you have that information available. We basically can't depend simply on a final net income figure. We have to see what goes into that.
right. And so one of the things that's important to understand about applying for tuition assistance here, we will make grants again, typically in the beginning of March. Many families have not yet filed their taxes at that point, and you're using good estimates as you complete these tax forms for us. It's important to realize that we will ask the Columbus Academy, again, this is actually principles of good practice, that we ask for verification of these numbers. So after taxes have been filed with the IRS, it is important to upload those documents to your SSS account. And what we will do is, again, we'll be reminding you to do such things. But what we will not be able to disperse the tuition assistance grant until those forms are in. And again, if there's any problem, be communicating with the office, and we can, we'll work with that. We understand lots of things. We always want to make individual exceptions where we can, but we need that communication from you, to be sure.
There is a part on the SSS form too, that when the SSS receives that tax information, there's a column that we see that says that this amount has been verified by way of taxes. Now, once again, as John said, when we receive your information prior to your taxes being filed, then we are able to make an estimate based upon the information we have. But if something happens with your taxes that ends up creating a difference in that estimated family contribution, sometimes your tuition assistance might be increased or decreased after we receive that tax information. So, as I said, it's important to be as complete as possible when you're providing that information in terms of estimated taxes, et cetera. Sometimes people will put in their estimated taxes what they have paid in taxes through the year prior to getting a refund. So for example, if you paid $15,000 in taxes, but then you get a $10,000 refund, in effect, that's only a $5,000 tax bill. And therefore your ability to pay your estimated family contribution might be a little bit higher than it otherwise would be.
Sure. And we don't see this a lot.
Right.
It sounds like, oh my gosh, you have to be to the penny. There is enough of a factor, enough of a fudge factor, if you will, that SSS is not routinely reaching out to us saying, hey, this family situation has changed significantly. So don't be nervous about this. Mr. Exline and I believe both have applied for tuition assistance through the FAFSA program that's the college level. So we understand your blood pressure rises as you're filling out these forms. You get anxious, you get nervous. So please let us help you with any of that anxiety. We do not want this. We understand it's already an anxiety-producing experience. We want to make sure that we're being very reasonable. I do want to mention sometimes families will talk to us and explain, oh well, one of the parents is going back to school, so they're going to have a drop in income, something of that nature. You want to speak to that just a little bit, Mr.
Well, yeah. Once again, it's important that you explain why the reasons for any drop in income. Typically, going back to school is not considered. That's a personal choice, and decreases in income as a result of that. We do put into the algorithm a minimum wage factor for people for parents who are not working, with the exception of those that have young children still at home. If you are not working, we add a certain minimum amount to your income, so that if you do go back to college, then there is that additional amount that we see that actually is an income for you because of the choice that is made about going back to college. Hopefully the expectation is that that'll allow you to make up that income at a later point. But the point is, once again, the NIS principles of practice say that when parents make the choice to be non-income earners for whatever the good reason might be, we still have to take into consideration at least a minimum amount of potential income that they could, or imputed income that they would have been earning.
Sure. So again, it sounds like there are all sorts of these things that you don't know about in advance and that we know. Please, we are trying to the tuition assistance committee in general. They are very big-hearted. The reason they got into this business is to make sure that we are making Columbus Academy as affordable for all. All we're trying to do is make sure that there is as level a playing field as we can have, so that because it's a finite resource, as we allocate those resources, the tuition assistance committee needs to make sure that they're doing their due diligence and following, accepted guidelines. Hope that makes sense.
Right. The goal is to make sure that everyone who applies for tuition assistance is given an amount that corresponds to what their need is within our resources available. And obviously, if situations change, please once again let John know, and we certainly study those things if they happen. But once again, the more complete the information is when the application first comes in, usually the simpler the process, both for you and for us.
Sure. And after families apply, I will, if the committee has any questions about an entry, good example is that in December, family added an extra 0 to their income. So instead of their real income, it looked like they had made 10 times that amount. If we had just followed up standardly, that family would have not been able to receive a grant. But we called, we checked, and got it all worked out. So if there are questions, I will be reaching out to you. Are there any questions in the chat? Nancy.
I have two questions here. Does Columbus Academy offer any scholarships, and also what percentage of students receive aid?
Okay. Well, what percent? It's about between 22 and 25% in the most recent years have received tuition assistance, need-based tuition assistance. The 25% number actually includes those faculty students who have received remission. So it's low 20%, but it's almost a quarter, between a fifth and a quarter of our student body. It is important to note that almost all of those awards are partial grants. Very rarely do we give a full grant. We expect some contribution from each family. In terms of the first question about scholarships, there is a small merit scholarship program only for new incoming ninth graders. If we had some money reserved or left over, we would offer it to 10th graders, but that happens infrequently. But the merit scholarship is not a need-based program. So for those students who are going into grade 9, we've got great applicants, as you may imagine. We will take probably the top 6 to 8 students that we have accepted, and they will be invited to the Merit Scholarship semifinalist competition. They receive a $1,500 grant that is renewable for 4 years at that point, and they come in and are competing in a very soft way for more. That the Merit Scholarship Committee is allowed to go up to half tuition. Typically, we don't go up to half tuition on any individual. What we'll do is we will allocate our budgeted merit scholarship money to those students who come. So the typical award may be in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $7,000. In addition, there are 2 named awards that actually are need-based. What I just talked about was the merit scholarship. Those are not need-based. And the merit scholarship, one last thing about it, it can be combined with need-based aid to reduce a family's net tuition obligation. There are 2 scholarships that are worth speaking about. One is the Alumni Scholar. And so for the incoming 9th graders who have applied for tuition assistance, they will come through and they will meet and have an interview with some alumni from Columbus Academy. And the reason for going through that process is that the Alumni Scholar gets 100% of demonstrated need met. As Mr. Exline and I said, we aren't meeting 100% of demonstrated need. Typically, it's something between 80 and 90%. For the Alumni Scholar, the student that they choose gets 100% of their demonstrated need met. The family only needs to come up with the EFC, the estimated family contribution. There's also one other named scholarship, the Malone Scholarship. And the Malone family gave $2 million to us about 10 years ago now, right? Maybe even 12 years. And it's a wonderful program that it actually pays for everything. And now again, demonstrated need, whatever the EFC is, a family would pay that EFC for the student. But everything else is included. They buy a letter jacket for the student after they earn a varsity letter, pay for the prom ticket. So it is a very, very complete scholarship. Now, again, it's only demonstrated need. So if a family, according to SSS, can pay $6,000, $6,000 is all that they will pay for the entire experience of that year. So those are the 2. The Malone Scholarship, again, available to 9th graders who are incoming and new. There is a separate essay that is due. If you're out there and watching this, please, and you know that you're applying for tuition assistance for your ninth grader, please shoot us an email or call the office, and we'll get that essay out to you right away.
And those are the Malone scholarships are renewable year
Yes.
to year.
Yes. Anything else, Nancy?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. Well, can you think of anything else that they need to know, John?
No, I think covered pretty
Okay.
well. Yeah.
If you do have further questions, please, as the Director of Tuition Assistance, I look forward to talking with you. One thing that's very important to note that I should have picked up on, or I should have mentioned earlier, tuition assistance is 100% confidential. We at the school, there's very few individuals who will know that a student or family receives tuition assistance funds. We will not share that information with teachers. There's a small number of administrators who are aware and who know, but it is not common knowledge by any stretch. We keep it confidential, and frankly, we expect our families who receive tuition assistance, we expect them to keep it confidential. As a family accepts a grant, they actually sign a little piece of paper that says they won't discuss their award with others, and that it's actually not to scare anyone again, but it's a cause for retraction. But this is a very individual, just like the rest of the school. We're trying to meet individual needs. So that's the confidentiality piece is very important. So anything else?
No, I think that's
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much for joining us for the Zoom at noon. Thank you, Mr. Exline,
My
for
pleasure.
being here. We have upcoming Zooms at noon next week with Stephanie Campbell, who's the Director of Sage Dining Services, and we'll be talking about particularly our lunch program, but Sage Dining Service in particular. Later in February, we'll be talking with Pascal Olasambe about our diversity program here at Columbus Academy. And finally, late in February, we'll be talking with Christy Benning and a couple of students about our community service program here. Always fun to host these. Look forward to seeing you all, and we look forward to answering any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.